Imagine it is the afternoon of December 4th, 1872. You are a sailor aboard the British brigantine Dei Gratia, a merchant vessel making a steady, uneventful passage across the vast, rolling expanse of the mid-Atlantic. The weather is fair, the winds are light, and the ocean is calm. Your world is one of profound and deeply boring routine. The creak of the ship's timbers, the snap of the sails, the endless, hypnotic rhythm of the waves against the hull. You are 1,000 miles west of Portugal, a tiny, self-contained world of wood and canvas in a vast, empty wilderness of water. But as you scan the horizon, you see something that does not belong. It is another ship, a brigantine like your own, but it is moving strangely. Its sails are partially set but ragged, some of them torn, and its course is erratic, yawing in the gentle swell, as if there is no one at the helm. It is a ship that is visibly, unnervingly, adrift. As your vessel, the Dei Gratia, draws closer, your captain, a man named David Morehouse, recognizes the other ship. He knows her well. She is the Mary Celeste, an American vessel that had left New York City just a week before his own departure. He had had dinner with her captain, a decent, sober, and highly respected mariner named Benjamin Spooner Briggs, just before they had both set sail for Europe. To see her now, in this state of silent disarray, is a deeply unsettling sight. Captain Morehouse hails the other ship, his voice carrying across the quiet water. There is no reply. He hails her again. Only the sound of the wind and the sea answers him. The ship is not flying a distress signal. There are no signs of a struggle or a fire. She simply sails on, a ghost in the afternoon sun. This is not a story of a dramatic, violent sinking. It is not a tale of a ship lost in a mighty storm. It is a far stranger and more chilling mystery. It is a story about a profound and total absence. It is the mystery of a perfectly sound, seaworthy vessel, fully stocked with food and water for a long voyage, found sailing on a calm sea with absolutely no one on board. Its entire human complement, Captain Briggs, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 experienced sailors, had vanished from the face of the earth, leaving behind a perfectly preserved, floating tomb. Tonight, we are not going to chase the sensationalist legends of sea monsters or pirates. We are going to do the opposite. We will be conducting a slow, methodical, and deeply boring investigation into the known facts of the case. We will step aboard this ghost ship with the salvage crew and conduct a tedious, room-by-room inventory of what they found. We will analyze the mundane details of the ship's cargo, the state of the captain's cabin, and the final, frustratingly normal entries in the ship's log. We will examine the competing theories, not through the lens of drama, but through the cold, hard science of maritime procedure, of alcohol fumes, and of the unforgiving realities of the 19th century ocean. This is a journey into the quiet, eerie heart of the greatest and most enduring maritime enigma in history. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, the sighting, a drifting anomaly on a calm sea. The mystery of the Mary Celeste begins not with a storm or a battle, but with a simple, profound, and deeply unsettling observation, a violation of the unspoken rules of the sea. For a professional sailor in the 19th century, the ocean was a vast and lonely place, but it was also a world of profound and predictable order. You knew how a well-run ship should look, how it should move, how it should sit in the water. The first, jarring clue that something was terribly wrong with the Mary Celeste was that it was failing this simple, visual test. Imagine you are the first mate of the Dei Gratia, Oliver Devo. It is your watch. For hours, your world has been one of routine, of scanning the empty horizon, of checking the ship's course, of listening to the familiar sounds of your own vessel. Then, you spot her. At first, she is just a smudge on the horizon. But as your ship closes the distance over the next couple of hours, a series of small, strange, and deeply unprofessional details begins to accumulate in your mind. Her sails are not properly set for the light wind. They are askew, some of them torn and flapping uselessly. Her movement through the water is sloppy and erratic. A well-crewed ship, even in a light swell, holds a steady course. This ship is yawing, drifting with the current, its bow swinging aimlessly from side to side. It is moving, as one of the sailors would later testify, as if it had no one at the wheel. Captain Morehouse is called to the deck. He trains his telescope on the vessel and confirms the initial, unsettling impression. He can see no one on the deck. There is no helmsman visible at the wheel, no lookout in the bow. This is a profound violation of the most basic laws of seamanship. To leave a ship's deck unmanned in the open ocean was not just negligent, it was unthinkable. It was a sign of either catastrophic illness or a complete breakdown of discipline. He orders his ship to close the distance further. As the Dei Gratia pulls alongside her, the silence from the other vessel is deafening. There are no sounds of a crew at work, no shouts of greeting, no sign of life at all. The ship is a ghost, drifting on a calm sea, under a fair sky. This initial sighting is the crucial, often overlooked foundation of the entire mystery. The conditions were not extraordinary. There was no gale, no hurricane, no sign of any recent, violent weather that could explain the ship's disheveled state. The sea was, by all accounts, placid, and the ship itself, from a distance, did not appear to be in distress. Her hull was intact. Her masts were standing. She was not taking on water. She was, to all outward appearances, a perfectly sound and seaworthy vessel. It was this profound and chilling contradiction, the sight of a perfectly healthy ship, sailing on a calm sea, with absolutely no one guiding her, that transformed this from a simple maritime encounter into the opening chapter of an enduring enigma. The problem was not what the sailors of the Dei Gratia saw. It was what they didn't see. And it was this profound, unnerving absence that would make the story of the Mary Celeste a legend. The approach, a slow, methodical hailing with no reply. The decision has been made. The strange, erratically sailing brigantine demands a closer look. For Captain Morehouse of the Dei Gratia, this is no longer a matter of simple curiosity. It is a matter of maritime duty, the unspoken law of the sea. The profound and sacred code that binds all sailors is that a vessel in apparent distress must be rendered aid. And so, the Dei Gratia alters its course. Its sails trim to slowly, cautiously, close the distance to the mystery ship. What follows is not a dramatic, high-speed chase, but a slow, methodical, and deeply unsettling process of approach. A 2-hour-long conversation in which one side remains stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. Imagine you are that first mate again, Oliver Deveau. Your initial, vague sense of unease has now sharpened into a focused, professional concern. Through your telescope, you can now see the details of the other ship with a new and disturbing clarity. The name on her bow is clear, Mary Celeste. You can see that her jib and foretopmast staysail are set, but the mainsail has been blown out, its tattered remnants flapping uselessly in the wind. The ship is under far too little sail for the conditions, explaining her sluggish, uncontrolled movement. But this only deepens the mystery. Why would a competent crew not have repaired the sail or set others to maintain control of their vessel? It is a sign of profound and inexplicable neglect. As you draw closer, your captain gives the order to hail her. You cup your hands to your mouth and send the traditional call across the water. Ahoy, Mary Celeste! Are you in need of assistance? Your voice, which seems so loud on your own quiet deck, is swallowed by the vastness of the ocean. You wait. The only reply is the creak of the other ship's rigging and the soft wash of the waves against her hull. You try again, louder this time. Ahoy, the Celeste! Is anyone aboard? Again, only silence. The absence of a reply is a deeply unnatural thing in the social world of the sea. It is a violation of all protocol, and it transforms the atmosphere from one of concern to one of genuine dread. A ship that will not answer a hail is a ship with a terrible secret. The final stage of the approach is a slow, careful, and deeply tense maneuver. Captain Morehouse brings the Dei Gratia upwind of the other vessel, a position of safety from which he can observe her for a long time, without risk of collision. For 2 long, slow, and deeply boring hours, the 2 ships drift in parallel, less than a quarter of a mile apart. It is a silent, floating standoff. The crew of the Dei Gratia lines the rails, their eyes scanning every inch of the other ship, looking for any sign of life, any clue to the mystery. They see the ship's wheel spinning freely, confirming that no one is at the helm. They see that the ship's single lifeboat, a small yawl that was normally stowed on top of the main hatch, is missing, a crucial and perplexing piece of evidence. This suggests the crew had abandoned ship. But why? And how? The ship itself, apart from the torn sail, appears to be in perfect condition. There are no signs of a fire, no splintered masts from a storm, no damage to the hull. Finally, after 2 hours of this silent, unnerving observation, with no other option remaining, Captain Morehouse gives the order. He tells his first mate, Oliver Devoe, to take 2 other sailors, to lower a small boat, and to row across the quiet, grey water to the silent ship. Stepping aboard a ghost, the eerie silence of the deck. The journey across the small stretch of water between the 2 ships would have been the longest and quietest of the sailors' lives. Imagine you are Oliver Devoe, sitting in the stern of the small rowing boat, your eyes fixed on the hull of the Mary Celeste as it grows larger and larger. The sound of your oars dipping into the water feels unnaturally loud in the profound silence. As you pull alongside the ship, you see that her hull is sound, with no signs of a collision or a grounding. A rope is still dangling from her side. With a deep breath, you grab the rope and haul yourself up, your boots thudding onto the wooden deck. You are the first living person to set foot on this ghost ship, and the silence that greets you is absolute. The first thing that strikes you is the water. The ship is wet. The main deck is awash with it, and there are several feet of water sloshing in the hold. But this is not the sign of a catastrophic leak that you might expect. You sound the pumps and find that they are in perfect working order. The amount of water in the hold, while significant, is not life-threatening for a ship of this size. It is simply the result of the ship having been left to fend for herself, taking on spray and rain for days or weeks without a crew to man the pumps. It is a sign not of disaster, but of simple, profound neglect. You and your 2 men begin a slow, methodical, and deeply unnerving tour of the empty vessel. You walk the deck. The ship's sails are a mess, but her rigging and masts are sound. The forward hatch is open, as is the lazarette hatch in the stern. You move to the crew's quarters in the forecastle. Here, the scene is one of interrupted, mundane life. The sailors' sea chests are all present, their oilskin boots and foul weather gear still stowed. There are no signs of a struggle, no signs of a panicked departure. It is as if the men had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. You make your way aft, to the captain's cabin. Here, the eerie sense of normalcy is even more profound. Captain Briggs's desk is in order. The ship's logbook is lying open, its last entry dated 10 days prior, recording the ship's position off the Azores and noting no trouble. On the table, you find his wife's sewing machine, a piece of a child's clothing, still under the needle. A small harmonium organ is in its place, and a child's toys are scattered on the floor. There is no sign of violence, no overturned furniture, no bloodstains. There is only a single, strange detail. The captain's sword is found in his cabin, and there are what appear to be a few faint stains of blood on its blade. But that is it. The ship's sextant and its chronometer, the 2 most vital navigational instruments, are missing, as is the ship's register, and the single lifeboat is gone. The scene is a perfect contradiction, a portrait of a calm, orderly, domestic life that has been inexplicably and completely abandoned in the middle of the ocean. A mundane inventory, a tedious catalogue of the ship's cargo. Once the initial, chilling shock of the empty ship had passed, the work of the salvage crew, led by First Mate Oliver DeVoe, would have become a slow, methodical, and deeply boring process of creating a formal inventory. This was a legal and financial necessity. To claim the salvage rights for the Mary Celeste, they had to present a precise and detailed account of the vessel and its contents to the Vice Admiralty Court. This process was not a thrilling treasure hunt. It was a tedious, bureaucratic audit, a room-by-room, barrel-by-barrel catalogue of the mundane. And it is in the profound, almost aggressive, normalcy of this inventory that the mystery of the Mary Celeste deepens from a simple ghost story into a true, impenetrable enigma. The first and most important part of this inventory was the cargo itself. The ship's manifest, which was found in the captain's cabin, stated that the Mary Celeste was carrying a cargo of 1,701 barrels of American rectified spirit, or denatured alcohol. This was a highly volatile and valuable industrial product, destined for Genoa, Italy, where it would be used to fortify Italian wines. DeVoe and his men would have had to unbatten the main hatch and descend into the dark, stuffy, and silent cargo hold. Their lanterns would have revealed a scene of perfect commercial order. The barrels were all stowed correctly, with no signs of having shifted in a heavy sea. The painstaking work of counting them began. They found that all 1,701 barrels were present and accounted for. There had been no piracy, no theft. However, a crucial and deeply technical detail was noted. Upon closer inspection, the salvage crew found that 9 of the barrels were empty. This detail, which would later become a central pillar of one of the most compelling theories, was itself a masterpiece of boring, industrial detail. The barrels in the hold were made of 2 different types of wood. The vast majority were made of sturdy, porous red oak, but a small number were made of white oak, a much less porous and more reliable wood for containing volatile spirits. The 9 empty barrels were all from the less reliable red oak stock. This suggested not a violent act, but a slow chemical process. The denatured alcohol was known to be highly volatile, and it was possible that over the course of the voyage, fumes had slowly, imperceptibly, leaked from these 9 specific, lower quality barrels, slowly filling the enclosed, unventilated space of the cargo hold with a potentially explosive, invisible vapor. The inventory continued with the personal effects of the vanished crew. In the forecastle, the sailors' sea chests were all present. Opening them would have revealed not treasure, but the simple, pathetic, and deeply human possessions of a working sailor in the 19th century. A spare set of rough woolen clothes, a clay pipe, and a pouch of tobacco, a sewing kit known as a housewife, for mending clothes, perhaps a cheap, well-thumbed novel, or a bundle of letters from home. Their money was still in their chests. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of a panicked departure where men had grabbed their most valuable possessions. It was a scene of a crew that expected to return to their quarters at the end of their watch. The final, and perhaps most damning, part of the inventory concerned the ship's own provisions. The galley and the storerooms were found to be fully and completely stocked with food and fresh water. There was enough to last for at least another 6 months. This single, boring fact was a conclusive refutation of one of the most obvious theories. The crew of the Mary Celeste had not abandoned their ship due to a lack of food or water. They were not starving or desperate. Whatever had happened to them, it had happened in the midst of a perfectly normal, well-provisioned, and routine voyage. The captain's cabin, a scene of interrupted normalcy. We move now from the public spaces of the ship to the most private and intimate one, the captain's cabin. It was here that Captain Benjamin Briggs lived with his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia Matilda. And it is here that the mystery of the Mary Celeste becomes not just a maritime puzzle, but a profound and deeply human tragedy. To step into this small, silent room was to step into a scene of domestic life that had been inexplicably and completely frozen in time. A quiet, sunlit portrait of a family that had, in the space of a single, unrecorded moment, simply ceased to exist. Imagine you are Oliver Deveau again, pushing open the cabin door. The room is in perfect order. The bed is unmade, as if the occupants had just risen for the day. On the floor, you see the small, scattered toys of a 2-year-old child, a silent testament to the presence of little Sophia. On a small table, you see Mrs. Briggs's sewing basket, a piece of a child's clothing laid out with the needle still in the fabric, a humble, domestic task that was started but never finished. In a corner of the cabin stands a small harmonium organ, an instrument Mrs. Briggs was known to be fond of playing, its keys now silent. The clothing of the captain and his wife is neatly stowed in their wardrobes. There is no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no evidence of violence or panic. It is a scene of profound and almost aggressive normalcy. On the captain's desk, you find the ship's slate, where the daily log entries were first jotted down. The final, chillingly routine entry is for the morning of November 25, 10 days prior to the ship's discovery. It records the ship's position at 8 a.m. as being just off the coast of the Azores island of Santa Maria. It notes the weather as fair and makes no mention of any trouble. The official ship's logbook, a more formal record, is also in its proper place, its entries all in order. But here, the first crucial pieces of the puzzle begin to reveal themselves. The two most vital navigational instruments for a 19th century sea captain, his personal sextant and the ship's chronometer, the highly accurate clock essential for calculating longitude, are missing. The ship's register, its official papers, is also gone. This suggests a departure that was not a panicked flight, but an orderly, and perhaps even planned, evacuation. A competent captain, even in an emergency, would take these 3 items with him before abandoning his vessel. And then there is the single, most sensational, and most deeply ambiguous clue in the entire mystery. Leaning in a corner of the cabin is Captain Briggs' sword. It is in its scabbard, but when the salvage crew draws the blade, they find what appear to be a few faint, reddish-brown stains on the steel. Was it blood? A small spot of rust from the sea air? The crew that found it believed it was blood, and this single, unverified detail would later fuel a universe of lurid theories about a violent mutiny. But the evidence was, and remains, completely inconclusive. This is the profound and maddening contradiction at the heart of the captain's cabin. It is a scene of almost perfect domestic tranquility, a portrait of a family going about its daily, boring routine. But it is also a scene of profound and total abandonment, punctuated by 3 missing instruments and a single, unreadable stain on a sword blade. The last entry, a slow reading of a perfectly normal ship's log. In the quiet, eerie stillness of the abandoned captain's cabin, amidst the scattered toys and the half-finished sewing, lies the single most important and most deeply frustrating a piece of evidence in the entire mystery. It is the ship's logbook. To a sailor, the log is more than just a diary. It is the official, sacred, and legally binding record of the vessel's life. It is a testament to the slow, methodical, and deeply boring routine of a safe and well-run voyage. And the log of the Mary Celeste is a masterpiece of this professional monotony. To read it is to find not a single hint of drama, not a whisper of fear, not a trace of the impending catastrophe. Its profound, almost aggressive, normalcy is what makes it so terrifying. Imagine you are Oliver Deveau, the first mate of the Dei Gratia, and you are the first person in 10 days to touch this book. You open its heavy, leather-bound cover. The pages are filled with the neat professional handwriting of Captain Benjamin Briggs. The entries begin, as they always do, with the departure from New York on November 7th, 1872. The first few days are a chronicle of the mundane. Light westerly winds, the captain writes, all sails set. Crew employed in the usual ship's work. It is the simple, repetitive language of 1,000 different logbooks, a story of a ship making steady, unremarkable progress. As you turn the pages, you follow the ship's slow, eastbound journey across the Atlantic. The log records the daily, tedious business of 19th century navigation. Every day at noon, Captain Briggs would have taken out his sextant and, in a moment of quiet, practiced skill, he would have measured the angle of the sun above the horizon to calculate their latitude. This, along with the ship's speed and course, would be dutifully recorded. The entries are a testament to a captain who was competent, professional, and completely in control of his vessel. There is no mention of any trouble with the crew, no record of any major storms, no hint of any mechanical failure. The final entry is dated at 8 a.m. on the morning of November 25th. It is written on the ship's slate, the small chalkboard where the daily log was first jotted down before being formally copied into the main book. The entry is chilling in its absolute, banal simplicity. It records the ship's position as being 6 miles off the coast of the Azores island of Santa Maria. It notes simply, "fair weather." And that is it. That is the last recorded word from the Mary Celeste. After that moment, the ship and its 10 souls sail on for another 10 days and 400 miles. But they do so in a complete and total silence. What does this final boring entry tell us? It tells us that on the morning of November 25, everything was completely normal. The captain was performing his routine navigational duties. The weather was good. The ship was not in distress. Whatever happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste, it happened after this moment, and it happened with a suddenness that gave no one the time or the opportunity to make a single, final, desperate entry in the ship's log. The book's silence, after this last, mundane entry, is the loudest and most terrifying clue of all. It speaks of a sudden, catastrophic, and completely unrecorded event that, in a matter of moments, erased 10 human lives from the world, leaving only their perfectly normal and perfectly silent ship behind. The missing chronometer, a technical analysis of a single, crucial detail in the quiet, ordered world of the captain's cabin. Amidst the mundane evidence of a life suddenly interrupted, there was an absence. And this absence was more telling, more significant, and ultimately more mysterious than any object that was left behind. It was the missing ship's chronometer. To a modern person, accustomed to the effortless magic of a GPS signal, this might seem like a minor detail. To a 19th century sea captain, it was an act of almost unimaginable significance. The ship's chronometer was not just a clock. It was the single most important, most expensive, and most technologically advanced piece of equipment on the entire vessel. It was the beating heart of the ship's navigational soul, and its absence speaks volumes about the final, unrecorded moments of the Mary Celeste. To understand its importance, you must first understand the profound and deeply tedious challenge of 19th century navigation. Finding your position on the vast, featureless expanse of the ocean was a problem of 2 parts: latitude and longitude. Latitude, your position north or south of the equator, was the easy part. A captain could calculate this with a simple sextant, measuring the angle of the sun at noon. But longitude, your position east or west, was a far more difficult and dangerous problem. The Earth is a spinning ball, and to know your longitude, you need to know the time. Specifically, you need to know the precise time at 2 different places at the exact same moment. Your local time, which you can determine by the sun, and the time at a fixed, universally known point, which was Greenwich, England, the home of the prime meridian. The difference between these 2 times allows you to calculate your exact east-west position. This is where the chronometer came in. It was a marvel of precision engineering, a highly accurate, spring-wound clock, housed in a series of gimbaled brass cases to protect it from the violent motion of the ship. Its sole sacred purpose was to keep perfect Greenwich Mean Time day after day, week after week, on a long and arduous sea voyage. It was an incredibly expensive and delicate instrument, often worth more than the captain's own annual salary. It was kept in a special, padded box in the captain's cabin and was wound, with an almost religious devotion, at the exact same moment, every single day. Its care and keeping were the captain's most solemn duty. The fact that this single, vital instrument was missing from the Mary Celeste tells us a number of crucial things. Firstly, it argues strongly against a simple, panicked flight. In a moment of sheer terror, a man does not stop to carefully retrieve a delicate and heavy navigational instrument. Secondly, it argues against a mutiny, in which the crew simply murdered the captain and sailed away. A mutinous crew would have needed the chronometer to navigate the ship to a safe harbor. Its absence suggests a deliberate, orderly, and planned departure from the ship, led by the captain himself. It suggests that Captain Briggs, for some unknown reason, made the conscious decision to abandon his vessel and take to the small lifeboat, and that he did so with enough time and presence of mind to gather the three things a captain would need to navigate that small boat to safety: his sextant, the ship's register, and the all-important chronometer. This single, missing object transforms the mystery from a story of chaos into a story of quiet, deliberate, and deeply baffling intention. The lifeboat question, a boring breakdown of davits and seaworthiness. The second great, physical clue to the mystery, visible from the very moment the Dei Gratia first pulled alongside the silent vessel, was the absence of the ship's lifeboat. This was not a minor detail. It was the single, most compelling piece of evidence that the 10 souls of the Mary Celeste had not been washed overboard in a storm, nor had they been secretly murdered and thrown into the sea. It was the undeniable proof that they had, for some reason, chosen to leave their large, seaworthy, and relatively safe vessel and commit themselves to the vast, open ocean in a tiny, fragile, open boat. This single, missing object is the linchpin of the entire enigma, and a slow, tedious breakdown of the mechanics of its absence only deepens the mystery. The lifeboat in question was a small, 14-foot yawl. It was not stored hanging over the side of the ship, ready for a quick launch. According to the ship's plans and the testimony of the men who had fitted her out in New York, the yawl was stowed securely on top of the main cargo hatch, a position that made it safe from being swept away by a wave, but also made it a difficult and time-consuming object to launch. It was not a matter of simply cutting a rope and letting it drop into the water. It was a slow, methodical, and deeply boring piece of shipboard labor. To launch the yawl from this position would have required the crew to first assemble a set of davits, the small cranes used to lift a boat. They would have had to rig a system of blocks and tackles, physically hoist the heavy wooden boat up from its chocks, swing it out over the side of the ship, and then, with a coordinated effort, slowly and carefully lower it into the water. This was a procedure that would have taken a well-drilled crew a significant amount of time, perhaps as much as half an hour, even in calm conditions. It was not something that could be done in a moment of sudden, overwhelming panic. The very fact that the boat was gone, therefore, speaks to a departure that was orderly, deliberate, and unhurried. But this raises an even deeper and more profound question. Why would an experienced captain and crew, in a seaworthy ship that was not taking on a life-threatening amount of water, in weather that was recorded as fair, choose to abandon their vessel in this slow and methodical way? To leave a 100-foot-long, 282-ton brigantine for a tiny open yawl in the middle of the Atlantic was not just a strange decision, it was a form of suicide. The lifeboat offered almost no protection from the elements, and in the event of a real storm, it would have been swamped and sunk in a matter of minutes. The only logical reason to make such a choice would be if the crew believed that the Mary Celeste itself was about to suffer a sudden and catastrophic fate, that the ship itself was a bomb that was about to go off. This is the central, maddening paradox of the missing lifeboat. Its absence proves that the crew left in an orderly fashion, but the very act of leaving in such a fragile vessel implies they were fleeing a terror so immense and so immediate that it made the known, almost certain dangers of the open ocean seem like the safer option. The human element, a quiet roster of the 10 vanished souls, For over a century, the story of the Mary Celeste has been told as a story about a ship, a ghost, a thing of wood and sail and iron. But the true, beating heart of the mystery is not an object. It is the 10 human beings who were on board, a small, self-contained community that, in a single, unrecorded moment, was completely and utterly erased from the world. To understand the mystery, we must first engage in the slow, quiet, and deeply human work of remembering who they were. This was not a crew of nameless, faceless sailors. They were individuals, with families, with histories, and with their own mundane stories that were cut short in the middle of the Atlantic. The commander of this small world was Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was not a reckless adventurer or a drunken tyrant. He was a 37-year-old, deeply religious, and highly respected professional mariner from a well-known Massachusetts seafaring family. He was a teetotaler, a man known for his calm demeanor and his competence. He was also a co-owner of the ship, meaning he had a significant financial stake in its safe return. He was not a man who would abandon his vessel lightly. With him on this voyage was his 30-year-old wife, Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. Their presence on the ship is a testament to the captain's confidence in the safety of his vessel and the routine nature of the voyage. The captain's cabin, with its sewing machine and its scattered children's toys, was not just a workspace. It was a family home. The crew he had assembled was a small, professional, and almost entirely Northern European one. The first mate, Albert G. Richardson, was an American, a trusted friend of the captain who had served with him before. The second mate, Andrew Gilling, was a young man of Danish birth, also from Massachusetts. The steward and cook, Edward William Head, was another American. The 4 general seamen were all Germans from the Frisian Islands, a region known for producing some of the finest sailors in the world. Their names were Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, Arian Martens, and Gottlieb Gaudschall. They were all described as being sober, peaceful, and highly experienced sailors. This quiet roster of the crew is one of the most powerful arguments against the theory of a violent mutiny. This was not a crew of disgruntled, drunken sailors picked up from the rough taverns of a port city. This was a hand-picked, professional, and seemingly harmonious group of men, many of whom had familial or community ties. To believe in a mutiny is to believe that this small professional family of sailors suddenly, for no recorded reason, rose up and murdered their respected captain, his wife, and his 2-year-old daughter, and then sailed the ship away to an unknown fate. The human element, the sheer, mundane decency of the people involved, makes this theory almost impossible to accept. And so, we are left with a quiet, human puzzle. 10 good, ordinary people, going about their ordinary lives on a routine voyage, who simply, for no reason, stepped out of the world, leaving only the quiet, ghostly echo of their interrupted lives behind. Theory 1, the mundane. A slow examination of mutiny and piracy. When a ship is found abandoned on the high seas, its crew vanished. The first and most logical suspicion that comes to the human mind is one of violent, criminal action. And so, in the immediate aftermath of the discovery of the Mary Celeste, the first theories that were proposed, and the ones that were most eagerly seized upon by a sensationalist press, were the simple, brutal, and deeply mundane explanations of mutiny and piracy. These theories require no strange science or supernatural intervention, only the dark and predictable constants of human greed and violence. But when these theories are held up against the cold, hard, and deeply boring evidence found on the ship itself, they begin to slowly, methodically, and completely fall apart. Let us first consider the theory of a mutiny. The story goes that the German crew, perhaps drunk on the ship's cargo of alcohol, rose up against their American captain. In a violent struggle, they murdered Captain Briggs, his wife, and his small daughter, along with the other American officers, and then escaped in the lifeboat, hoping to be picked up by a passing ship and disappear. This is a dramatic and compelling narrative, but it is contradicted by almost every single piece of physical evidence. The ship, upon its discovery, was not a scene of violent chaos. There was no sign of a struggle. The captain's cabin was in perfect order. The crew's quarters were undisturbed. And most damningly, there was the cargo itself. The crew could not have gotten drunk on it. The denatured alcohol in the hold was not a drinkable spirit. It was a foul, poisonous industrial chemical. And what of the pirates? This theory suggests that another ship pulled alongside the Mary Celeste, its crew of seafaring brigands swarming aboard to murder the crew and plunder the vessel. But this, too, makes no sense. The cargo of industrial alcohol, while valuable, was not the kind of treasure that a pirate could easily sell in a remote, lawless port. And if the goal was plunder, the pirates were spectacularly incompetent. They left behind the most valuable and easily portable items on the ship: the money in the sailors' sea chests, the personal jewelry of the captain's wife, and all of the ship's provisions. The single, most powerful piece of evidence against the piracy theory is the state of the cargo itself. Not a single barrel of the alcohol was missing. The pirates, it seems, had come aboard, murdered all 10 people, and then left without taking anything of value. The only piece of evidence that has ever been used to support these violent theories is the single, ambiguous clue of the captain's sword, found in his cabin with a few faint, reddish stains on its blade. The Attorney General at the Vice Admiralty Court in Gibraltar, a man named Frederick Solly Flood, became obsessed with this single detail. He was convinced it was blood, and that it was the key to proving a violent mutiny had taken place. He even had the blade sent for a scientific analysis, a deeply tedious and ultimately inconclusive process that could only confirm the stains were not from rust, but could not definitively say they were from human blood. And so, the mundane theories, the ones that rely on the simple, predictable evils of men, all crumble under the weight of the quiet, contradictory evidence. The ship itself, in its strange, undisturbed, and deeply boring state of preservation, is the most powerful witness against them. The natural, a slow examination of seaquakes and waterspouts. If the mundane evils of mutiny and piracy do not fit the strange, silent evidence of the Mary Celeste, then perhaps the explanation lies not with the hand of man, but with the far more powerful and unpredictable hand of nature itself. The ocean is a place of immense and sudden violence, a world of strange and terrifying phenomena that, even today, are not fully understood. For the sailors of the 19th century, these events were often seen as supernatural, as direct and inexplicable acts of God. This leads us to a second category of theories, ones that propose the crew of the Mary Celeste was not driven from their ship by greed or malice, but was scared from it, in a moment of pure, primal terror, by a force of nature so strange and so overwhelming that they chose the almost certain death of the open ocean over the immediate horror of remaining on their vessel. The first of these theories is that of a seaquake. This is a rare but documented phenomenon, where an undersea earthquake or volcanic eruption creates a powerful seismic shock wave that travels up through the water column to the surface. For a ship at sea, the effect would be deeply unsettling and profoundly unnatural. The vessel would be violently shaken, not by waves, but by a strange, vertical, shuddering motion from beneath, as if the ship had run aground in the middle of the deep ocean. The sound would be a deep, grinding, and terrifying roar, coming not from the sky or the sea, but from the very depths of the earth itself. It is easy to imagine how such an event, in a superstitious age, could be interpreted as a sign of the apocalypse, a monstrous sea creature rising from the abyss to attack the ship. This theory suggests that the violent, unnatural shaking may have caused the crew to panic, believing the ship was about to be destroyed from below, and to abandon it in the lifeboat. It's a compelling idea, but it has one significant, and deeply boring flaw the physical evidence. A seaquake violent enough to cause a crew to abandon ship would almost certainly have left some trace of its passing. The ship's cargo of barrels would have been thrown about in the hold. Objects in the captain's cabin would have been knocked from the shelves. Yet, the scene on the Mary Celeste was one of almost perfect, undisturbed order. A second, and perhaps more plausible, natural explanation is the phenomenon of a waterspout. The waters around the Azores, where the ship was last sighted, are known for their sudden and violent squalls. A waterspout is a tornado that forms over water, a swirling, columnar vortex of wind and water that can create a terrifying and dramatic spectacle. The theory posits that the Mary Celeste was threatened by the sudden appearance of one or more of these powerful waterspouts. The crew, fearing the ship was about to be dismasted or swamped, might have made the decision to temporarily evacuate into the lifeboat, perhaps intending to trail the ship at a safe distance on a long tow line until the immediate danger had passed. This would explain the orderly nature of the departure and the missing navigational instruments. It would also explain the water found in the ship's hold. A waterspout is often accompanied by a torrential downpour that could have easily swamped the decks. In this scenario, a sudden, powerful gust of wind could have parted the tow line, or the squall could have separated the two vessels, leaving the tiny, fragile lifeboat and its 10 occupants alone and lost in the vastness of the ocean, while the larger, more durable mothership sailed on, empty and unharmed. It is a neat, logical, and deeply tragic theory, a slow and methodical examination of a plausible, if unprovable, natural disaster. The chemical, a tedious breakdown of alcohol fumes, and a panicked evacuation. There is one final theory, a hypothesis that has gained more traction and credibility among modern historians and scientists than any other. It is a theory that requires no mutiny, no pirates, no sea monsters, and no waterspouts. It is a slow, methodical, and deeply boring theory, rooted not in high drama, but in the simple, predictable, and deeply dangerous chemistry of the ship's own cargo. It suggests that the crew of the Mary Celeste was not attacked by an external force, but was driven from their ship by a terrifying, invisible, and entirely internal threat. This is the theory of the explosive alcohol vapor. The cargo, as we know, was 1,701 barrels of denatured American alcohol. What is crucial to understand is the specific technical nature of this product. This was not a stable, inert liquid. It was highly volatile, meaning it could easily turn into a vapor. And this vapor, when mixed with air in an enclosed space, is highly explosive. The cargo hold of a 19th century wooden ship was, for all intents and purposes, a sealed, unventilated box. This is where the second, deeply tedious detail of the inventory becomes so critically important. The 9 empty barrels. These 9 barrels were all made of red oak, a wood that is known to be more porous and less reliable for containing spirits than the white oak used for the rest of the cargo. The theory goes like this. Over the course of the voyage, as the ship moved from the cold of a New York November to the warmer temperatures of the mid-Atlantic, the alcohol in these 9 lower quality barrels began to seep and to vaporize. Slowly, silently, and invisibly, the enclosed space of the cargo hold began to fill with a highly flammable, explosive mixture of alcohol, vapor, and air. The crew would have been completely unaware of this happening, but at some point, perhaps a buildup of pressure from the expanding vapor, or a small shift in the cargo, caused the hatches to blow open with a sudden, loud, and terrifying whoosh. Imagine you are Captain Briggs. You are on deck, and you hear a strange, rumbling sound from below, followed by a loud, explosive exhalation as the main hatch cover is blown off, and a wave of hot, strange-smelling vapor pours out of the hold. You would not know what it was, but you would almost certainly believe that your ship, filled with thousands of gallons of volatile spirits, was on the verge of a catastrophic explosion. In this moment of perceived, imminent disaster, your actions would be swift, professional, and entirely logical. You would not panic. You would order an orderly, but immediate, temporary evacuation. You would order the crew to launch the lifeboat. You would have the presence of mind to grab your vital navigational instruments, your chronometer and your sextant, and the ship's papers. You would likely attach the lifeboat to the ship with a long tow line, the 900-foot-long main peak halyard, which was later found to be missing from the ship. Your plan would be to move a safe distance away from your vessel and to wait, to see if the ship was going to explode. And in that moment of waiting, 100 things could have gone wrong. A sudden squall could have parted the tow line. A freak wave could have swamped the small, overloaded lifeboat. Or perhaps, most tragically of all, the wind could have simply filled the sails of the empty, high-riding Mary Celeste and carried her away from the small lifeboat faster than the crew could row, leaving them to watch, in horror, as their only hope of survival slowly, inexorably, sailed away over the horizon. This theory is powerful because it explains every single, strange, and contradictory piece of the puzzle with a quiet, logical, and deeply boring scientific precision. The official inquiry. The slow, grinding machinery of maritime law. When the Mary Celeste, now manned by a small prize crew from the Dei Gracia, finally sailed into the port of Gibraltar, her strange and silent journey was over, but her ordeal was not. She had escaped the mystery of the sea, only to be ensnared in the slow, grinding, and deeply suspicious machinery of 19th century maritime law. The ship and its cargo were now the subject of a Vice Admiralty court hearing, a legal process designed to determine the salvage award to be paid to the crew of the Dei Gracia for rescuing the vessel. But the hearings were quickly taken over by one man, the Attorney General for Gibraltar, a man named Frederick Solly Flood. He was a lawyer of immense self-regard and a deeply suspicious nature, and he was immediately convinced that this was not a story of a mysterious abandonment, but a case of foul play. What followed was not a swift investigation, but a long, tedious, and often deeply biased legal inquisition that stretched on for nearly 3 months. Solly Flood was possessed by one single theatrical theory, that the crew of the Dei Gracia, the very men who had saved the ship, were in fact the villains of the story. He proposed that they had conspired with Captain Morehouse to murder Captain Briggs and his crew, perhaps in a drunken brawl, had thrown their bodies overboard, had then sailed the Mary Celeste for a week, and had then concocted the entire ghost ship story in order to claim the salvage money. This theory was based on almost no evidence, save for the faint, unverified stains on Captain Briggs's sword, which Solly Flood was convinced was proof of a bloody struggle. The legal process was a slow, repetitive, and deeply frustrating one for the men of the Dei Gracia. They were held in Gibraltar for months, their own voyage ruined, as they were subjected to endless, repetitive, and accusatory questioning by Solly Flood. The court ordered a complete, inch-by-inch examination of the Mary Celeste, a process that was itself a masterpiece of boring, methodical detail. Shipwrights were brought in to check the integrity of the hull. Divers were sent down to inspect the ship's bottom. Every single object on board was catalogued and scrutinized. The logbook was examined for any signs of tampering. The ship's charts were compared with the known course of the Dei Gracia. In the end, after 3 months of this exhaustive and deeply tedious investigation, Solly Flood could produce not a single shred of concrete evidence to support his dark suspicions. The court, in its final judgment, grudgingly acknowledged that there was no proof of foul play, but the damage had been done. The judge, clearly influenced by Solly Flood's aggressive and unsubstantiated accusations, awarded the salvagers only a fraction of what the ship and its cargo were worth, a sum so low it barely covered their expenses. The men of the Dei Gracia, who should have been hailed as heroes, left Gibraltar under a cloud of suspicion, their reputations unfairly tarnished, and the official inquiry, which should have been a sober search for the truth, had instead become a wild goose chase, a slow, grinding, and deeply frustrating legal drama that failed to solve the mystery and only succeeded in adding another, deeply human layer of injustice to the tragic story of the Mary Celeste. A century of silence. Why the wreck has never been found. The story of the Mary Celeste should have a final, definitive chapter. In the modern age of deep-sea exploration, of side-scan sonar, of remotely operated vehicles that can pluck a teacup from the deck of the Titanic 2.5 miles beneath the surface, the discovery of her wreck should be an achievable goal. A definitive archaeological examination of her final resting place could finally answer the questions that have haunted this mystery for over 150 years. We could see if her hull was damaged by a seaquake, if her cargo hold shows signs of an explosion, if the remains of her crew are anywhere nearby. But the Mary Celeste has stubbornly, frustratingly, and completely refused to give up her final secret. Her second ghost story is not her strange unmanned voyage in 1872, but her complete and total disappearance from the historical and physical record after her life as a mystery was over. After the salvage hearings in Gibraltar, the ship was sold and passed through the hands of 17 different owners over the next 13 years. She became an unlucky ship, a vessel tainted by her own legend. She was a pariah of the seas, a ship that other sailors would give a wide berth, her decks rumored to be haunted by the ghosts of her vanished crew. Her final, ignominious end came in 1885. Under the command of a new captain, a man named G.C. Parker, she was loaded with a worthless cargo of old rubber boots and scrap, which was then heavily and fraudulently insured. The captain then deliberately sailed her onto a well-marked and dangerous reef off the coast of Haiti, intending to scuttle her and collect the insurance money. But even in her death, the ship seemed to defy a simple end. The attempt to scuttle her was a failure. The ship did not sink immediately, but became stuck on the reef, where she slowly caught fire and burned to the waterline before breaking up and sinking in pieces. The insurance fraud was so obvious that the captain was arrested and put on trial. This is where the modern search begins, and where the rabbit hole of frustration deepens. We know, with a high degree of certainty, the general location where the ship was wrecked, but finding her has proven to be an impossible task. The Rochelet Reef is a treacherous and chaotic underwater environment, and the ship was not sunk in a single, intact piece. It was broken apart by the waves and the fire, its component parts scattered across a wide and difficult-to-search area. Over the years, numerous modern expeditions, armed with sophisticated sonar and magnetometers, have attempted to locate the definitive remains. The most famous of these was led by the author and adventurer Clive Cussler in 2001. His team did find the remains of a 19th century shipwreck in the correct location. They recovered timbers of the right age and type, and even an anchor consistent with the period. For a moment, it seemed the mystery was solved. But the final, deeply boring, and deeply scientific process of verification proved otherwise. DNA analysis of the recovered wood could not definitively match it to the known timbers used in the construction of the Mary Celeste. The wreck they found was likely a 19th century ship that went down on that reef, but it was not the ship. The Mary Celeste remains lost, her final resting place, a secret guarded by the warm, coral-strewn waters of the Caribbean. Her story, which began in the cold mystery of the Atlantic, ends in the quiet, frustrating silence of a lost grave. And so, we arrive at the end of our slow and methodical voyage. We have stood on the silent, empty decks of the Mary Celeste alongside the bewildered salvage crew. We have conducted a tedious, room-by-room inventory of a life interrupted, of a breakfast uneaten, of a sewing project unfinished. We have read the last, chillingly normal entry in the ship's log, and we have analyzed the profound and telling absence of the lifeboat and the chronometer. We have sifted through the competing theories, dismissing the dramatic but unsupported tales of mutiny and piracy, and weighing the more plausible, scientific explanations of natural disasters and chemical reactions. After all this, after 150 years of investigation, of speculation, and of searching, we are left with a single, profound, and deeply unsatisfying truth. We still do not know what happened. The story of the Mary Celeste endures not because it is a story of high drama, but because it is a story of perfect, unassailable mystery. It is a locked room puzzle on an oceanic scale. Every single clue that we have, every piece of the puzzle, is a contradiction. The orderly state of the cabins and the missing navigational instruments suggest a calm, deliberate, and planned evacuation, led by a competent captain. But the very act of abandoning a sound and seaworthy ship for a tiny, fragile lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic is an act of profound and almost suicidal desperation. The ship tells two stories at once, a story of calm and a story of terror. And because these two stories are in perfect, irreconcilable opposition, the mystery can never be truly solved. The theory of the explosive alcohol vapor is, by far, the most elegant and the most scientifically plausible. It is the one theory that seems to account for every single piece of the puzzle. It explains the crew's desire to get away from the ship quickly, but in an orderly fashion. It explains the missing lifeboat and navigational tools. It explains the state of the cargo. It is a neat, logical, and deeply satisfying solution. But it is, and will always be, just a theory. There is not, and can never be, a single shred of definitive proof. It is the best guess in a sea of guesses. And so, we are left where we began. We are left with a quiet, empty ship, drifting on a calm sea, her sails askew, her wheel untended. The Mary Celeste is more than just a historical event. It has become a myth, a powerful and enduring symbol of the unknowable. Her story is a testament to the fact that sometimes history does not give up its secrets. Sometimes there is no final answer. There is only a perfect, beautiful, and deeply unsettling question, left for us by 10 vanished souls, a question that will drift forever, unanswered, on a silent and empty sea.